Hey there, pilot fans! Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and today I have a custom video that I've made for you on the Pilot Custom Pens. Now, if you know anything about Pilot pens, you know that the word custom is shown in a lot of different model names. There's a bunch of numbers typically involved. Well, we've gotten enough questions about them over the years, and then I thought it would be helpful to put together this explainer video that will cover all the modern Pilot custom pens available in the US. Here's what I'll be going over today in this video. We'll cover a brief history, some background of the custom series. We'll explain the custom nomenclature, what all the different numbers mean. We'll explain the Pilot custom nib offerings, because there's a bunch, an explanation of the different Pilot custom pens, and what differentiates them from each other. And it will help to show you which Pilot customs maybe are ideal for your specific needs. Now, Pilot pens have been around since about 1918. And in 1971, they came out with the Pilot Custom K series, which was the first generation of the series that would endure for over 50 years and is still going strong. Now, they're called custom pens because they're pens with nicer materials and more nib grind options than were available from other standard fountain pens at the time. By offering pens with more options, users were able to have a more of a custom experience to suit their personal tastes. Today, they're mostly known for being reliable writers with a fairly timeless design. You'll notice that there are a bunch of different numbers associated with the Pilot custom models, and they might seem kind of random, but there is a method to the madness. It's not a particularly useful method to anyone, but it's a fun little Easter egg for Pilot fans. So look at any of the Pilot custom models with numbers in it, and look at the first two digits. That represents how many years after Pilot's founding year that the pen was first released. So the founding year was 1918. So for example, the Pilot Custom 823 was released in the year 2000, which was 82 years after 1918. Cool, right? Now the third digit, if there is one, it represents how many multiples of 10,000 yen the pen cost at its release in Japan. So the 3 in the Pilot Custom 823 shows that it was 30,000 yen at its release. So for a pen like the Pilot Custom 74 that don't have a third number, I think there's like an implied 1 at the end representing 10,000 yen. So the bigger that last number on the model, the more expensive that the pen was at its release, basically. Now, I'm not 100% confident about this numbering system for all custom models over their years since the inception, especially as there are some that do kind of break the normal convention, but I think it's mostly applicable. It's also not that essential to shopping for the pens, or certainly for using and enjoying them. But at least now you know somewhat what they're named after. And the two Pilot pens that they've released since their 100th anniversary in 2018 were the Pilot Custom Heritage SE and the Custom Urushi. So no numbers in those ones. So I don't really know what they're gonna do for future pens. Are they gonna have 4 digits instead of 3? I don't really know. I guess we'll find out. All right, so there's a lot to talk about with the Pilot nibs, as they make all of them custom and in-house. And the grinds and the dimensions and whatnot are unique to Pilot. They're not interchangeable with other brands. Now, here are some of the basics that I think are gonna be helpful to understand as we cover each pen model. The nibs on all the custom pens are gold, some 14 karat and some 18 karat. And there's not a huge difference between 14 and 18K. They both write really great. Pilot uses their own numbering convention to indicate the overall size of the nib. That doesn't quite match up to other nib manufacturers like maybe Jowo or Bach that you might have heard of. But as a general rule, you can know that the lower the number on Pilot's nib, the smaller the nib is. The larger the number, the bigger the nib. And as you'll see as we progress, they're gonna get pretty big. Pilot's number 5 nib is slightly larger than the number 5 nib that you might see from Jowo or Bach, and they're not interchangeable. They're different number 5s. The Pilot number 10 is about halfway between the Jowo number 5 and number 6. Pilot number 15 is about like a Jowo or Bach number 6, and the Pilot number 30 is comparable to a Jowo number 8. There are some nibs from Pilot that are outside of these, but this is gonna cover everything within the Pilot custom line, at least currently. Now there's a cool little Easter egg on all of Pilot nibs, gold nibs actually. So if you look down at the base of the nib, you'll see a 3 or a 4 digit number, really, really small down there. You basically need a loop to be able to read it, but it's a date stamping indicate when the nib was manufactured. So it's stamped month, then year. So if it has a 3-digit number, it'd be like, if it's 371, that would be March of 1971. I think it's really neat because I can look back on my pens, even ones as old as my Pilot Custom K, and see that it was actually made in 1971, the year the custom line was introduced. So that's just kind of neat if you happen to have any Pilot Gold Nib pens lying around. A little known feature about the Pilot custom pens is the way that they fill, which I absolutely love. Now, most fountain pens have a filler hole that's kind of tucked up in the feed, right at the base of the grip. So you basically need to submerge the whole nib up to the grip to fill from a bottle, and then you get a little bit of ink on the grip. It's not a huge pain, but that's just kind of normal procedure for filling, just any standard fountain pen. But the Pilot feeds have a filler hole in the feed close to the end. Not, it's only about a centimeter or maybe 3/8 of an inch from the tip of the nib. That means that you can fill from bottles with lower ink levels, and if you're skilled, you can potentially fill your pen without getting any ink on the grip at all. It takes a little practice, but you can do it, and I think that's really cool. So let's cover all of the custom models, at least the ones that I'm most familiar with, as they're the ones available in the US. Now, because I want to give good information here, I'm going to mention prices, but just know prices can change, but I can't change the video. So this is always subject to variance and changes over time. So, always check our website, Goulet Pens, to see what the current price is for any of these. All right, so let's take it model by model. I'm going to be starting with the most affordable and going on up. The first one we're going to cover is the Pilot Custom 74, which is a pen that is near and dear to my heart, as it was my literal first gold nib fountain pen that I ever acquired back in 2011. Now, this pen has been around since 1992, and it's still going strong. It has rounded ends, and it comes available in 8 different translucent colors in the body and the cap. And it's got smoky translucent finials and grip on all of the color variants. Now, there have been more colors that are no longer available, and they may do more in the future, at least I hope so. It's a relatively lightweight pen, and it writes really fantastic, as Pilots do. Now, the nib on this one is 14 karat gold, and it's got rhodium plating, so it's yellow gold under there, but it looks silver colored because of that plating. And they do have a really nice bounce to them. That's the thing I love about these Pilot nibs. Custom 74 has a number 5 Pilot nib, the smallest one in the custom lineup. The overall nib size matches well to the 74 though. I don't feel like it's a small nib in relation to the rest of this pen. And you're getting a really good writing experience, even though it's a smaller nib in their lineup. Custom 74 comes in an extra fine, medium, and a broad, though we usually don't stock the broads as they're just not that popular for us. Though my wife Rachel does love that broad nib. Now, you'll get a consistent ink line with these nibs, and the extra fine and fine in particular are finer than most other pens. That's something most of the Japanese brands do really well, Pilot in particular. So if you like finer nibs, you may really enjoy those ones. The medium tends to be more of my go-to, but honestly, I love them all. And with the cap insert that's on these pens, the nib stays really wet and ready to go longer than your average fountain pen. Now, this one comes with a Pilot Con 70 converter. That's their high ink capacity push button filler. However, they can also take the standard Con 40 converter, a Pilot Namiki ink cartridges, or even older variants of the converters as well. This is one of my most highly recommended entry-level gold nib pens across all brands. It was a fantastic introduction for me, and it really writes so well, and it doesn't break the bank. At $220 MSRP or $176 at Goulet Pens, it's the most affordable Pilot custom pen and the one that I would recommend without hesitation to anyone wanting to try out the custom series. Now, the Custom Heritage 92 is an often overlooked model in the custom series. It's similar in size to the Custom 74 with an identical grip, nib, and feed. The most noticeable difference is gonna be the flat ends. And it's got a sword clip instead of that ball clip, which, is kind of a design element that I like. And then the biggest difference is gonna be that filling mechanism, which you can clearly see in this demonstrator pen. It's actually the flat ends on here that distinguish it as a Custom Heritage. Just a fun little fact there. Though it's not every pen that has that, but still, if it says Heritage, you know it's gonna have a flat top. You can even see Custom Heritage engraved on the center band, so you know for sure that's what you're dealing with. Now, this is a piston filling pen. It's actually the only piston filling Pilot pen that I'm aware of that's made today. And it's certainly the only one offered in the US, which is kind of cool. It comes in one color, clear demonstrator, and you can get it in fine or medium from Goulet Pens. You get that same really cool filler hole in the feed, which is great. You get that same cap insert, which seals the nib really well. And it's just a great daily writer, just like the Custom 74. The only downside to this pen is, perhaps the price. It's a bit of a jump up to $300 MSRP or $240 at Goulet pens. And because of that, I think it isn't quite as popular, but it's still a really great pen. Now, let's take a look at the Custom Heritage 912. This is going to have a similar overall look to the Custom Heritage 92 with those flat ends, but with the 912, it's a solid black and not a demonstrator. It's also going to be slightly larger in diameter, but the overall length is pretty similar to the Custom 74. You're going to see the same 14 karat nib as you will in the 74 and the 92, but this is going to have Pilot's number 10 nib. This number 10 nib is going to be about halfway between a Jowo number 5 and number 6 nib in terms of its overall size, so slightly bigger than the number 5. You can get the Heritage 912 in any color you want as long as it's black, but what it lacks in color offerings, they make up for with nib grinds. Instead of 3 or 4 nib offerings like the other pens mentioned so far, this one you get 15 grind options. 15! Out of all the pens that we carry at Goulet Pens, this one has the most expansive nib offering of all of them. Now they have standard nib grinds like your fine, your medium, your broad, and all that, but you can also get into soft nibs with like extra bounce to them. Super broad ones like the double broad, the coarse. You can get a flex nib in that FA, a stub nib, music nib, and specialty nibs like the Posting and the Waverly. Now I'm not gonna get into full detail on all these grinds in this video because that could be its own whole standalone video. And it's something I've been thinking about doing, but honestly, it's been a little daunting. So let me know in the comments if you really wanna see that, because it's something I could put together if you're really interested. Now the sword clip on this pen is gonna be a similar clip that matches the Heritage 92, which I really like. And the overall shape is really nice, very classic. It fits the proprietary Pilot Namiki cartridges and comes with a Con 70 push button converter, just like the Custom 74. Now the price on this one jumps up a little bit. Gets $350 MSRP or $280 at GPC, but it's worth it if you want one of these specialty grinds in particular. The next model up is the Custom 743, which was introduced in Japan in 1992, but started coming into the US last year in 2023. So it took us a while to get it. It increases in overall size around the Custom 74 and the Heritage 92. We're looking at that classic cigar shaped pen with the rounded ends. And with this one, you're gonna get an expansive nib offering, just like you will with the Heritage 912, with a total of 14 available nib grinds. Except with this one, you get a slightly larger nib with Pilot's number 15 nib. That's gonna put you right about the size of a Jowo number 6 nib. It has an opaque body that can come in black or a verdigris, like a nice green. And the verdigris is a North American exclusive. This pen exclusively has gold trim as opposed to the rhodium trim that you've seen on all the pens up to this point. You'll get a full range of nibs available in the black one. The verdigris has a more limited nib offering though. Now I think the overall size of this pen is great. It's gonna be comfortable for just about any size hand, especially if you have larger hands like me. But those with smaller hands are really comfortable with it too. And you can either post or unpost this pen. It's good either way. It's got a nice long body, so you don't have to post it, but if you do, it's still well balanced. And you also get that same great sealing cap and easy filling feed. This is a cartridge converter pen and comes with the Pilot Con 70. It's been a really popular model since it was brought into the US, and I hope to see them expand even more over time. Now, price-wise, you're looking at $420 MSRP or $336 at Goulet Pens. And this is a popular alternative for people that want a simpler filling mechanism than its close sibling, the Custom 823, which is coming up now. All right, so the Pilot Custom 823, I would probably consider to be like the flagship of the Pilot Custom line. It's not the most expensive or the fanciest, but it's extremely popular and probably one of the better known models. It's essentially identical in overall size, shape, and the nib and feed setup to the Custom 743. The big difference will be that the 823s are tinted demonstrators, which you can get in amber, smoke, or clear. And then of course, the filling mechanism. The 823 is a vacuum filler, which is the only Pilot pen that has this type of mechanism. It holds a massive ink capacity, over 2.5 milliliters, and it locks the ink chamber when the piston is closed all the way to make traveling easier without leaking and burping, which can sometimes happen with pens with this high of an ink capacity. It's a really cool filling mechanism, though I think it'll ideally be more suited for those who like to keep the same ink in a pen and use it for a long time, as opposed to someone who likes to change colors a lot, because it is a little more work to clean this pen out than the cartridge converter models. You get that same number 15 Pilot nib in the 14 karat gold like you had on the 743. And this one is going to be yellow gold to match that gold trim as well. Now your nib grind options are going to be more limited than on the custom 743. On this one, you get a fine, medium, and broad. And as of 2024, a new one called Signature, which is like a really gentle stub nib, but it's definitely more on the broad side. This one's priced identically to the 743, so it's $420 MSRP, $336 at Goulet Pens. Okay, so far we've talked about, what we consider more the entry-level gold nib Pilot custom pens. And this next one is where we get into a little more of the premium line. So at first glance, the Pilot custom 845 Urushi doesn't look all that different maybe than a custom 912. Except it's going to be a little bit bigger. But what really sets it apart is the pen material. Instead of being a resin pen like all the ones up to this point, this body is made of hard rubber, often referred to as ebonite, and it's coated with Urushi lacquer. Now, Urushi lacquer is a very durable finish that comes from Asian lacquer trees, and their sap is harvested and then hand painted on the barrels to create this really hard lacquer coating. Urushi finishing is an ancient craft in Japan going back to the 7th century, and artisans trained for years to do this type of work. And there are two colors available on the 845 Urushis, the traditional black and then a bold red known as vermilion. And both have yellow gold trim and black finials and a black grip. So looks relatively simple, but it's very, very classic design and very Japanese. You'll find the same Pilot custom cartridge converter filling system on the 845, including that Con 70 with it. And the feed design is also going to be similar. It's a slightly bigger feed because of the nib, but it's going to have that same filler hole, which I love. And it's got that number 15 size nib, just like the 743 and the 823. However, you're getting an 18 karat gold nib instead of a 14 karat one. So the nib will feel ever so slightly bouncier. And it also has a two-tone finish, with the yellow gold of the nib showing on the border and the inside coated with rhodium for that silver look. And I really love this two-tone look. Now the trim on this pen is identical to the 743 and the 823. It's got maybe a little bit more embellishment on some of the trim rings. It's gonna be overall pretty close in proportions to these other two pens as well. Now because of the fancier nib and the handwork involved with the Urushi lacquer and the ebonite body, the custom 845 Urushi is a more premium price at $900. All right, it's been a lot of pens so far, and I appreciate you hanging in there with me. We've covered most of the Pilot custom pens in their lineup, and most people are probably familiar with those. Maybe even have a couple of them. But now it's time to really knock your socks off with this beast of a pen, my personal new favorite, the Pilot custom Urushi. Now this mammoth is new to Pilot as of 2016, and it stands out in terms of its sheer size compared to all the other custom pens. This will not be a pen suited for everyone. It's pretty big. But for a large-handed writer like me, this thing fits like a glove. As much as I appreciate the size of this pen, the thing that I really love the most is the nib. Pilot created an entirely new nib in their lineup for this pen, which is a number 30 size, comparable to a Jowo number 8 size nib, which you honestly don't see in very many pens. It's the biggest and bounciest nib in the custom lineup, and it writes like an absolute dream. This is gonna be an 18 karat gold nib with a two-tone finish, kind of like the 845. It's got that gold border and then the rhodium in the middle of the nib. It just looks so good. Now the two nib sizes on this pen are a fine medium and a medium, and they're gonna be springy, responsive, wet flowing, super reliable, very consistent lines. And it's got that filler hole within the feed, which on a huge nib like this is gonna be super helpful. You get that same cartridge converter filling mechanism as you do with most of the other Pilot customs here, with the Con 70 included with the pen. And like the custom 845, the custom Urushi is also a Urushi lacquer finish over that hard rubber. And you can get it in black or vermilion, just like the custom 845. And it's gonna have gold trim and black accents on both colors of the pen. Now the material of the pen actually makes it relatively lightweight for a pen with such a formidable presence. Overall weight is gonna be 43 grams. Now that's not super light, but the body alone, if you're not writing with the cap, is only 25 grams. That's actually very reasonable and comfortable. And it's plenty long enough in your hand to write comfortably unposted. I write almost exclusively with it unposted, even though I tend to post most of my pens normally. Though you can certainly post it if you want with this one, but it is going to be pretty hefty if you do that. The larger than life nature of this custom Urushi has probably made this a grail pen of mine for most people. That was certainly the case for me. I was looking at it for years, and it lived in that realm, and it probably will for you too. But it's definitely priced in that grail pen range at $1,500. So it's not something you'll probably see that many folks carrying around, but if it's up your alley and you're seriously considering it, I couldn't recommend it any higher. Now, as you're searching around the internet, you're going to find a lot of other Pilot custom pens with numbers that aren't quite what I've stated here. Since they've been around for 50 plus years, and there have been many variants retired or ones that have been kept to the domestic Japanese market, you'll find some that maybe look kind of close to the ones in this video, but have some slight differences. I just couldn't cover these extended offerings. For one, this video was getting insanely long and complicated, and also because nailing down every detail on these custom pens is simply too daunting of a task for me, especially doing it with enough accuracy for it to live forever in a YouTube video like this. Well, that certainly is a lot to take in, I know, and honestly, there's a lot of very specific differences between these models that even I struggle to remember after being in this industry for 15 years. Now, if you are trying to compare these pens to each other, we have a number of tools that we put together on gouletpens.com. You can check out the compare feature that we have across products. That can be really helpful, especially for detailing some of the technical specifications. We have a tool called the Pen Plaza, where you can literally see standardized images of the pens next to each other for comparisons of length and diameter and stuff. It gives you a visual reference. And then the Nib Nook, where I have a writing sample that I've done with every single nib and every single size on all these pens. So if you want to see how they write, how they compare, it can be a really helpful tool there as well. And you can also reach out to our team directly at Goulet Pens for any questions you might have. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. It's taken a lot to put it together, but it's a labor of love, and I really love these pens, so I'm glad to be able to share that with you. And I just really hope that you get to experience this Pilot custom line of pens. They are truly some of my favorite pens in the world, and I know that I'm not alone in this feeling. Thank you so much for watching, and right on.